You're listening to the Bear in Mind Podcast, episode 133.
A podcast that breaks it down so you can break the cycle for good. Now, your host, Tara Rama, but you can call her T.
This is a question that has come up for me. How to communicate anger effectively. And the question before that is, should you communicate your anger? And then if the answer to that question is yes, then how? And so today's episode is going to help you answer that question for yourself. I am going to go through my process having read a lot about anger, and then I think the more important part outside of reading about it and doing research on it is how I applied that in my life and the answers that I found. Now, it may not be that these are the answers that are applicable to your life and how you want to go about living. But by even me going through the journey and talking about the things that I learned and applied, that will help you figure out your own answers to that question about should you communicate your anger? And if so, how do you do it effectively? So, and there is this kind of thing about, I want to say battle a little bit, where we see kind of anger as bad a little bit. It's a negative emotion, therefore it's bad. And then we have this other fight of it that we should be able to express all our emotions and is healthy and all of those things. And you get to decide this for yourself. Should you communicate anger? And to answer that question, and I think you know what I'm going to ask you, is why do you want to communicate that anger? Your reason for wanting to communicate that anger. So I've talked about, for example, venting. If you want to tell your friend a story and you're extremely upset and you want to share your story and you want to vent, and your reason for doing so is you want to talk to someone about it and you want somebody to listen, and that's it, and you like your reason, then yes, I think in that moment, it's okay. Where it becomes a little bit tricky is when the venting is then we think that it's a solution to processing that emotion, feeling that emotion, or when we're seeking validation, we're seeking somebody to say we're right about it. And we're seeking something from that other person that we are venting to. And even when we're seeking them to be an ear for them to listen and they don't listen, which this actually happened to me recently, then even knowing that expectation that person not behaving how you wanted them to be, that your reason wasn't that you expressed it to get that response. And so, like your reasons, whatever reason it is. And I shared recently with a friend of mine, we were talking about her anger. She was angry at a friend. And then I said, I had a similar situation. And I shared with her the same situation. And then she said to me, that doesn't count. You can't be angry about that. I was like, it's the same, very, very similar situation. And what I noticed is when she said that to me, I had a slight emotional reaction to it. And I noticed it in myself in real time. And I noticed that I probably still had a little bit of anger to process on that story. And so that brings me to when you communicate and you decide that you want to communicate, you like your reasons and you're not seeking something from somebody else. And you know that you are not seeking something from somebody else when other emotions come up for you. So for example, I still was a little angry at what my friend said. If I had processed all the emotions from this incident that I was describing, then whatever she said to me, whether it was a criticism or discounting it, saying, my anger wasn't valid in this situation, then I know that I have processed that anger.
So that is in essence what I've learned about venting anger, is that when I have completely processed it and I want to share a story, I don't have an expectation to how somebody is going to respond to that story, that they're even going to validate it, agree with it, or solve it for me. There's kind of this no expectation in that sharing. I'm sharing it because I want to share my story. And then that's the end of the story. So the second element of communicating your anger is oftentimes we want to communicate our anger to the person that we have linked our anger to. And we ultimately think that our anger is attributed to someone's actions, something they said to us. So we want to address it with that person. And this comes up a lot in relationships, especially in some of our most intimate relationships, maybe with our primary caregivers or our parents, with our partners, where we want to say, hey, I am angry and I feel angry a lot because you do this. And there in of itself, just even the idea of communicating anger and linking it to somebody's behavior is what causes most of our frustration. Now, I've talked about this in a lot of episodes when it comes to taking ownership of our anger and not linking it to somebody else. And this is a more difficult task. And this is kind of why I think I talk about it a lot, because I hear so much of this linking between why we're angry attributed to how somebody else behaves. And we are even taught to do this. And when I was reading some stuff on how to communicate your anger with somebody, there's even a specific phrase. If you look this up on the internet, it's, I feel blank. So let's say I feel angry when you do this. And that phrase, even though you're not saying it, there is a link. I feel this because you did this. And we are taught this. We say this to our kids. We're like, oh, don't do this because it hurts mama's feelings, or don't do this because it hurts your brother's feelings. And our anger, our hurt feelings or whatever is not attributed to how somebody behaves. There's this element of how we think about that behavior that causes our emotional reaction of anger, that causes that feeling inside of us, and then how we react to that anger later. So when my partner doesn't listen, and that is not even a fact, when I even think that he's not listening, I feel angry because I think he should be listening to my story. He should be agreeing with my story. He should be on my side. And so when we go to communicate anger with someone about something that they have done, and we often do this, right? We want to address things with our children, with our partner. We want to address certain things that we want to change. And we don't want to feel angry anymore. And we go about trying to communicate that because we think that this is going to be the solution. By communicating with them, we want some sort of change. We want some sort of change in something that's happening in a behavior. And that is where the source of our continuous frustration lies, is because we are still linking the solution with that other person. So if I communicate to my partner, I'm angry because you're not listening, or because you look at your phone when I'm speaking to you, I will continue to feel angry because I think that he shouldn't be looking at his phone when I'm telling him a story. And then we want that person to change so that we don't feel angry. So if he stopped looking at his phone, I would feel better. I wouldn't feel angry. I wouldn't feel frustrated. Now, does that mean you never tell your partner or your children that you're angry, how you feel? No, that is not what I'm saying. It is back to what I said in the first part of this episode, is that when you have processed your anger, you then understand the reason why you're angry. You're angry because you want somebody to behave a certain way. And when you've cleaned that up and when you've understood that that is why you're angry, you will then be able to find the words to communicate your anger. So with my friend, if I had processed all of my anger about something and I told that story, it wouldn't even matter how somebody reacted. If I cleaned up my anger when I tell my partner, hey, could you not look at your phone and make that request? Could you not look at your phone when I'm telling you a story? I would say that in a different manner than if I was still feeling angry about it. If I still was holding on to that emotion, if I was still holding on to that belief that he shouldn't be doing that. And let's say I let go of that belief. He can behave however he wants. He cannot listen. He can look at his phone or not look at his phone. And I make that request. I say, hey, could you not look at your phone? And whether or not he does that change, my emotional state is not dependent on it. It doesn't matter. I've made that request. If he does it, great. If he doesn't, it's also okay. It's also great. Because the way I feel, I'm not going to attribute it to the next time I tell him a story and go, oh, okay, you brought out your phone. And then that is where communicating the anger, it's your freedom that you can just communicate that. And it comes out in a very different way when you're not actually feeling angry. And that's the paradox. You don't actually feel anger when you're communicating about your anger. It'll come out a little lighter. It'll come out with no attachment. It'll come out not as a criticism to the other person. They're more likely to probably hear that message when there's no attachment to some outcome that you have about their behavior. So back to that original question, should you communicate your anger? Well, if you're still feeling angry, I think maybe answer that question when you're not feeling angry. And then you'll probably have a better answer and a better way to communicate to the people in your life. That's all I have for you this week. I'll check back with you next.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.